So I'm
Brilliant.
here today with Miss Nettie coming all the way from Bali. So we're so grateful to have her here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anyone who navigates that kind of time conversion from Bali here to LA is really committed. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And I just want to, I can't say enough great things about Nettie's practice, and it's just really a pleasure to watch her on Instagram. But I just want to give her the floor space to begin with to, why don't you just introduce yourself to us for somebody who may not be familiar with your work or your background, and tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so I came from a bodybuilder background, so a lot of weight training, not that much mobility practice. Then I kind of was like, oh, I want to get strong. I want to get flexible and mobile. And at the same time, I was pole dancing. And if you know anything about pole dancing, you're not just dancing around the pole. You've got to pull your limbs in all sorts of directions or actively hold them as well. So I kind of implemented a little bit of flexibility through the dance school that I was with. And it was very passive, very kind of being pulled in every direction. Doesn't matter what was suited to your body. It was just pure torture. So I kind of went into my own practice, trying to figure out what worked for myself. And again, all I knew was passive flexibility, just stretching and holding positions for long periods of time. And to be honest, it was quite boring, and I had to force myself into it. But it gave me a good baseline of basic stretching, how to hit different areas. And then, funny enough, I ended up with an injury through pole dancing where it stemmed from pretty much having super weak hamstrings and glutes at the same time. So it implemented like sciatic kind of pain through my legs. So then that took me
dancing and like background and strength conditioning and everything, you still felt weakness in your glutes and hamstrings. I'm asking because so many people have trouble in those areas.
Well, the reason for it was I was strengthening them in a weight-based way, like doing hamstring curls and doing squats and stuff, but I was doing them on top of muscle imbalances. So I didn't have the best foundation for what I was putting my body through. So it kind of enlightened me into the world of body conditioning and body weight movements and flexibility with end range strength. So I kind of delved deep into that world of, okay, well, if I'm lengthening this area of my body, I'm going to have to strengthen the opposing side to bring the balance in, depending on where my restrictions and imbalances were. So it kind of went from passive to then conditioning into the flexibility practice. So not just aiming to be as bendy as I can. I wanted to be as strong as I could in those end ranges. So I then started implementing like time under tension, active flexibility. So being able to hold these positions, and you pretty much visit the world of cramped city, as I like to call it. So a lot of compression work, a lot of finding where my own restrictions were at the time and what was needed. Because I always tell my clients this, like, to not treat the symptom, to treat the cause. And if you know the root cause of your restrictions, then you know how to treat them, because a lot of people get misled by the sensations that their body gives them. So what I like to do with the people I work with, my clients, is to get them a better understanding of what their body is trying to tell them. So it came from being as stiff as a board. Like, I'm not naturally gifted. You do find many mobility coaches or people in that background come from either gymnastics, ballet, or hypermobile. So they tend to not be able to relate to their clients. So I'm kind of proud of how rigid and stiff I once was and still am. So I'm still working on these progress, because at the same time, I don't believe you should rush these things too, because then the injury comes knocking at your door again. So it's all about being safe and not being in pain. You can be in slight discomfort, because if you're challenging yourself, it shouldn't be as easy as anything. So it was all kind of finding that correct balance in your training. So it's one of those things where the more you do this, the more of a better understanding you have of your body. So it's good to take yourself out of your comfort zone and explore these areas as well. So coming from
so your practice really started from a very physical place, and then as you progressed throughout your journey, you saw that, you know, there is injuries and certain vulnerabilities and things feel right in your body. So it sounds like your mobility practice is really this pursuit of finding balance of both strength and flexibility in your body, and being able to use that even at your end races. I love that.
Yeah, 100%, because a lot of people just strive to be able to pretty much passively put themselves in these positions, especially with there's so much yoga inspiration out there now, and you just see these pictures of people pulling their body in all these kind of positions, and then they save it and they're like, that's my goal, I want to have that. I'm like, wouldn't you want to also have the control of that mobility as well? Like, if you've ever heard of a dragon squat or a pistol squat, something where it's challenging for your body, but also it's in a way of displaying your current mobility level with your strength behind your movement as well. So I work a lot with people that have goals that incorporate the two together, and it's something where you can measure your progress through your movement as well and through your practice. There's a lot of people
measuring progress through movement, because what I talk about a lot with my students is how to set goals, right? So once somebody has bought into the idea of, okay, I understand that a personalized practice is important, I understand that mobility includes both elements of strength and flexibility, what is like a proper, how do I go about the process of setting a goal for myself, you know, beyond just feeling like, oh, this is what my body needs, or seeing something cool on Instagram and trying to emulate that?
So what I tend to do is I send out my clients a self-mobility assessment. So I don't have to be there for them to know what their restrictions are. So it ranges from head to toe, pretty much getting yourself into all funny stretches or positions or holds. And from that, they get a great understanding of where their restrictions are stemming from, by either how much they cannot move in that position to how much they can move in those positions. So they can get the kind of indicator of, okay, well, I don't need to work on this area because I've already got, maybe they've got a forward fold that's absolutely flat and they're completely compressed together. But then they might do something that still involves the hamstrings. That means actively holding their hamstring. They're cramping up like crazy. So it's a good indicator of, is that a weakness or is that a strength that you already hold? So I find when people they get in touch and be like, I feel this, what shall I do? And it's very hard to be able to give them an indicator without knowing their body from head to toe. So when I work with someone, I like them to know exactly what they need to be doing before we even get started. Because I don't think there's such a thing as, I've got tight hips, so stretch the hips. It's kind of, maybe you need more brain to muscle connection to be able to control those areas and so forth. So I find it quite a difficult thing sometimes to explain and gain people's trust first when it comes to, I'm feeling this, but why have you given me a conditioning exercise? Like, once the results come in, that's when they're like, oh, I truly understand why. But it's great they come to you and they gain that confidence as well in their practice. But a lot of people, they avoid mobility practice because of how uncomfortable they feel. And it's easy just to do your training if you are going to the gym and walk straight out the door without even giving anything to your body afterwards, like any movement or exploring what's currently going on. So I hope that answers kind of your question, that it's all about taking yourself out your comfort zone and actually trying to figure out what's going on, to know how your body responds to each movement or stretch and what you're feeling.
So it sounds like the process that you walk your clients through is very similar to mine, where there's some kind of assessment to begin with, and then you logically deduce a plan of, okay, here's the most important area to focus on first. So my question then is, okay, so what if I have like a lot of areas? What if I have like, you know, conflicting priorities, and, you know, I have like an elbow thing and a back thing and my neck kind of hurts, and
Yeah.
right, a lot of my students have like multiple pain points. So, you know, for the average person who might only have like, you know, 10 to 30 minutes a day to work on
Yeah.
mobility, what would you recommend for them?
Well, that's a great thing actually, because a lot of people experience referred pain. So I don't know whether you touch much on that. So sometimes it's great to figure out trigger points and work with a little ball and release those areas before you even start your mobility training. So a lot of people, I tend to give them trigger point work as well. So I'd research the pain of what they're experiencing, whether it relates back to their practice or injuries that they've had in the past. And it's good to release those areas or see someone for a good massage. And I'm not like talking about a relaxing massage,
Yeah.
one where someone's going to get into those trigger points. And a lot of people find a lot of upper body mobility gains once they start working on trigger points in their upper body and moving with the ball underneath them and releasing those areas before they even start their actual mobility practice. So it's all about the self-care that comes in between these things too, especially in my classes.
Fan in my head, I'm like, or the flag in my head, because that's exactly the approach that I take in my practice. So
Amazing.
yeah, because I do massage therapy and therapeutic body work in addition to. So I found once I introduced that modality into my practice, a lot of times the kinds of people who would be coming in would, like you said, need that kind of trigger point release. And so whether you're teaching them to do it themselves with the ball or I'm doing it with them on my table, it's the same concept, which is, yeah, I mean, before you go to the active mobility training, sometimes you do need that passive range first, or just the fibers of the tissue and the muscle are not like, it's just too dense to allow the appropriate range of motion. So like releasing all that out and then doing the mobility after, I find like the combination together just has far better results over the long term. And it's the same thing too. People are like, why are we doing it this way? But I'm like, hanging with me. It's going to be a little painful, a little uncomfortable, but by the end you're actually going to feel better, which is the important part, right? So.
Yes, exactly. Trust the process behind our madness. It works.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, because, you know, a lot of people, like, there's a lot of advice out there, and people are skeptical of bad advice. So yeah, that's really awesome to hear that, you know, half the world away, people are still doing things and approaching them the same way, because bodies are bodies, right? They respond to touch and sensation and different inputs much the same way.
Well, that's it. If you're restricted in a certain area, your body is protecting you from an injury half the time, or sometimes it just doesn't even know how to move in that range. So it's just letting your body relax and know that that range is absolutely safe for you to go into, and knowing your limits as well. And people tend to stretch for a while and they're just like, okay, where's the progress in this? Like, I'm not feeling any different. And you may not feel any different, but if you track through photos, like I have so many photos on my phone of people in all funny positions, just so later on down the line I can take a photo of them still feeling the same struggles, but obviously with a better understanding of that struggle, and then seeing their progress through images, because you might not necessarily feel them straight away, but you certainly would see them if you put a photo together from when they first started. So, and then most of the time they're quite shocked. They normally develop that kind of like tap, like well done, on pat on their back when they finally reach their toes, or they're able to squat comfortably. They see it physically, but when they see it in a photo, they are like, oh, okay, so I am moving in the right direction. It reaffirms that routine of self-care. So a lot of people would start, then just soon give up, and then you hear again, I'm going to focus on my mobility again. And it's kind of like, just consistency is key. That's all I want to get into people, is consistency is key. If you're doing it consistently, you're going to find out what your body needs. It's going to give you the confidence in your practice, because a lot of people that come to me, they have, if they do their mobility practice, they have a set routine they've been doing every single time they stretch, and they are super deep in these stretches and pretty much not knowing how to progress from there. And I'm like, well, if you've got so far with this routine that you've been doing every day, imagine if you did a routine that was actually suited to you and what you needed. You'll have the same results, but in the areas that you require. So it's kind of like getting people to understand what is right for them, but also well done to them for pretty much smashing the mobility practice they have been doing already. But a lot of people don't know how to regress or progress these movements. They'll kind of, do you know the pigeon stretch for the glutes?
Oh, of course.
That's the one that I always see people really low in, and they're like, yeah, I stretch my glutes every day and this is how low I am. And I'm like, well, if you tweak this area or move the back leg over to this angle, how does it feel? And they're like, oh yeah, I feel it now. So it's like just giving them the understanding of not only what they need to do, but how they can progress with what they're doing as well. So I like to give clients, they sometimes get overwhelmed by the amount of what they're given, but I kind of want to set them up for the future for when they do progress in their practice.
That's amazing. And yes, personalization, consistency, such key important elements to setting up a proper practice. So I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here, just for fun. And I'm just going to say, like, this sounds like a lot of work. Sounds like a lot of dealing with things, you know, if I'm going to put myself in the position of a student, it sounds like a lot of dealing with things that I've probably like put off for a long time, or honestly don't really want to deal with. You know, maybe if somebody's not like a mobility nerd like myself or yourself, how can they set themselves up to be motivated? Because what I see sometimes play out is that there's like this shame cycle that happens where people will start a little bit and then kind of fall off the bus and then try to start again, and then it doesn't really work and they don't see results. So it sets off this pattern and another layer on top of like it's another obstacle, the mentality part of it that gets in the way of them doing their practice. So do you have any like tips or recommendations for breaking through that and finding a way to keep your motivation even when you don't really want to do it?
Well, what I like to do before, if they train, so what I like to do before I even get into the gym kind of areas, I spend a good 5 minutes, not even an hour, just 5 minutes doing a basic CARS routine, which is controlled articular rotations. So I start from my ankles all the way up to my head, involving shoulders, wrists, everything. And you're just doing controlled rotations of the current range of mobility you have. So you treat it as a circle, each joint, and instead of most people do rotations, they skip it. I make sure I go through every single range of the current mobility I have. So I want to meet the very edges of my joint rotation. So that's a good indication of how someone can find out which each joint requires and how much range they currently have. So I start my practice with just 5 minutes of movement. Then I do my usual training. And then at the end, if I don't fancy a long mobility session, I won't do it. I'll just do 10 minutes, 20 minutes tops. A lot of people think they need to spend hours and hours each week on their mobility. And sometimes you can go in with all that enthusiasm that I'm going to start that. Then if you don't have that hour or 2 hours or whatever you need to do, you don't do it at all. So I think short and sweet works well for most people, because they're not overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have to do. So they'll go into their practice with no excuses. They're like, okay, well, I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to focus on this area. And they can split it up how they would with if they were weight training, if they were just doing shoulders one day or glutes the other day or hamstrings the other. They can focus on these areas one by one and split their training. So it's in manageable bite-sized pieces so they don't get overwhelmed with what they want to be doing. And a lot of the times I find my clients will set aside the 10, 20 minutes they need, and it will, if they feel like it, they find different areas to move into that will complement what they just did, which would come with a better understanding after time of what their body needs. But short and sweet, manageable sizes, you won't find excuses not to do it. And I've never heard of anyone regretting a mobility session. At the end, you just feel so great for it. You end up with the same endorphins that you would after a great workout. So it's just kind of getting that connection with your body that you don't need to spend hours and hours every day just in these stretches and being bored, and it's just keeping it spicy. So spicing it up. A lot of weights as well, contraction and release, and at the end of it you feel strong for it. So it's just gaining people's understanding of that. Short and sweet, get it done. 10-20 minutes is all you need, if that. Even if you do that cars routine, if anyone ever needs to look it up, there's YouTube videos out there of the whole routine of how to do from your feet up towards your head. So anybody just wants to explore their current ranges they have, it's a great place to start.
That's amazing. So if I were to just summarize everything you said, so it sounds like just keep it simple, keep it consistent. It can be 10-20 minutes. Always incorporate the cars routine as much as you can, and let that be a tool for self-assessment to determine where your priorities need to be, and adjust your time from there. And with that kind of simplicity and structure, it makes it really easy to ensure that you're personalizing to what your exact needs are.
Yes, exactly. Better understanding of what you need to be doing, and also having that bulletproof routine, which is pretty simple. Like, you just got to be slow and controlled with your movements, understand the feedback that's coming from your body, and just go from there.
So for people who may be coming from like kind of a no pain, no gain type philosophy, like how does this reconcile? Because like in so many areas of our life, we're kind of taught to just like push through things. So if I want, I have to fight for it. Like, and now you're telling me like, oh, go slow, like breathe a lot, like take your time. Like how did you transition from like the weightlifting world into this practice of mobility, and like where was that mentality shift for you?
Oh, it's a funny one, because I still weight train. It's still in there, but the body weight training is where I find the challenge. So I like to incorporate the two together. But when it comes to no pain, no gain, it's one of those things where I know in the long run my body is never going to relax, or never really going to enjoy what I'm putting it through, if the pain signals are going off. My face is pulling all weird kind of faces and holding loads of tension. I've just learned in the long run that it's not beneficial to push yourself. I always used to explain these things on a pain scale of 1 to 10. So if they were like, I'm at an 8, I'm at a 9, I'd be like, let's regress this completely, because when is your body ever going to relax if you're in excruciating pain? Like, so it's all about knowing how to regress each movement or each stretch or each isometric hold, just to relax and actually get the time for your brain to not be in pain, well, not be feeling the pain signals, but actually learn how to connect brain to muscle to those areas as well. So it's pretty much taking those steady steps, not spending those 10-20 minutes of mobility practice in absolute agony, because who would want to revisit that every single day? You're not going to want to explore that. You're soon going to be put off if that's what you're bringing into your life every single day.
Seems almost like a cruel joke, that to avoid pain that we don't want, we almost have to consciously seek out forms of pain that in some ways we do want and are good for us. Pain meaning like the discomfort of having to discipline yourself into doing a kind of practice like this, because that eventually will, you're almost making a small sacrifice in the present for a benefit in the future, and that's where you start to see the results really come in. So say that you've been doing a practice for a while. I've been doing my 5 minutes of cars, and I'm starting to get a better awareness of my body and a better idea of where my strengths and weaknesses are. Once I've done that for a while, when would you recommend somebody start to shift their practice, like out of that kind of that simple capsule? Like, how do I know when it's not me and I actually do need to change my practice. You see what I'm saying?
So when you kind of hit a plateau and you don't know where to go from there. Oh, generally that's when, so I always find with the cars routine, it's going to give you an indicator straight away of what's going on, especially when it's body weight. If you find yourself not being challenged by going through all those ranges, I start to get people brave enough to start implementing weights as well. So if you're doing cars routine for your hips, it involves lifting your knee up as high as possible, keeping your hips square, and then bringing your knee all the way out and then rotating back and then doing a little hamstring curl and returning back to the original position. So what I would do is get them to wear an ankle weight, because then they're implementing the strength behind the movement by adding a couple of extra kilos around their ankle. And with that, they're able to then extend their leg up even higher once they go back to their body weight. It's all about understanding whether you can still hold the correct form with the weight as well. So if you're finding these cars routines super easy, then a great way to progress it is by adding those weights, because you can do it with your upper body as well. You can hold on to a small weight plate or a dumbbell, or most of the people I work with don't even go to the gym, so they'll be holding a water bottle or a can of soup or something just to get the weight in their upper body while they do their shoulder rotations. And it's just one of those things where you can progress with body weight just by implementing small weights in there as well.
So it's like 3 pounds in mobility training can be a huge difference.
100%. Yes, you definitely will step up the intensity once you implement weights into your mobility practice as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like really the keys to this are, keep it simple, scale according to your ability, look for help if you have pain or need help figuring out what those progressions might be. A lot of this is very self-directed, which I love because it takes the dependency off of working with a coach or provider, except in specific circumstances where there's a need, and puts the empowerment and the responsibility back on the student. I think this is really what it all comes down to as well, because if you can take responsibility for yourself and your body and your practice in this way, then that kind of self-discipline and self-care can reflect in so many different areas of your life too. So
yes,
I would just ask, how do you feel that this mobility, having a consistent mobility practice, has benefited you in other areas? It sounds like almost all you train now is mobility, and whereas you did the mobility to try to do your strength training and your pole dancing, and now it sounds like kind of it a little bit, right?
Yeah, well, it's because my training, it's a lot of body weight movements as well. So my current goal is to be able to lift my legs in have you ever heard of an L-sit, where you're holding either P-bars or hands on the ground and you want to lift your legs up in front of you? For something like that, that was excruciating for me, because none of my practice was active. So to be able to lift up my leg, which I thought would be a simple thing because you're walking everywhere, you're using your hip flexors all the time, to be able to lift up my legs straight in front of me, I was in cramp city, and I was just like, this isn't going to help. If this is part of my training and I can't lift up my legs, especially if I was pole dancing as well, you have to invert with straight legs. My legs were always just all over the place. It never looked pretty. So I would say my mobility practice is kind of 30% of my training and 70% is performance and skills. So I implemented my mobility practice to involve a lot of weight, so compression strength work. And I found with compression work, which would involve me being seated on the ground, a weight plate on my leg, driving my legs up into the weight, and you feel the contraction in your quads and your hip flexors. And not only did that improve my leg lift to be able to lift up my legs and get them close to my face, which I never thought would be possible after not being able to even flutter kick in a core exercise, to then being able to have them right up close, actually improved my forward bend and the pancake position where you've got your legs open and you're bringing your chest forward. So it was all these kind of exercises where it involves a lot of strength, but not a lot of stretching. So it was a lot of active flexibility practice in there too. So I kind of found what was needed in those areas by finding my weaknesses through implementing different styles of mobility practice too. Because I don't feel I would ever be able to achieve those goals that I had set for myself without implementing contractile strength behind the mobility as well. So it was kind of like trying to figure out, okay, well, if I can't lift up my legs, what about if I stick a weight plate on my leg and then drive up and connect those muscles without even having to do the movement itself? It kind of translated in different areas of my practice as well. So I kind of came from just exploring it. Just once you open the can of worms into mobility, you end up looking into different styles of mobility, because passive is the one we all start with, just to increase our ranges in those positions. And then we move into active, ballistic. We also go into P&F kind of style, stretching. There's so much you can do to step up the intensity / progress in your mobility practice. There's a lot of information out there as well. So YouTube was a great thing, especially back then. I first started, before even having Up Your ROM, I was searching low and high for mobility ideas, and there wasn't really many people out there giving out any information. So I just did a lot of reading about the different styles of mobility, and then I was like trying to figure out these things for myself, really. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. There's more information out there now.
Yeah, you just kind of did like a DIY approach of putting together different pieces and came to solve the puzzle on your own, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to wrap this up and ask if there were any final tips that you wanted to share for somebody starting out this practice, or anything that you feel like was really the core of what you wanted to offer today.
Well, my advice to anyone is, if they wanted to start with short periods of mobility practice. Just get it into a routine so you don't feel like you can go the day or 2 days without moving and exploring your body. Then from there, I would want them to question, is what they're doing challenging to them? Is it easy? Do they need to progress in what they're doing? If they do, then they need to step out their comfort zone and find other areas that they need to work on. And they can find that through their CARS routine, find out what parts of the body needs that extra attention. Then obviously going into the release through using a little ball, seeing whether they can find any trigger points through their body, which gives them the signal that it needs extra attention. And then you can find more about your body through your joints as well, through your movement. I would say short and sweet, keep it simple. If you want strength behind your movements, implement weights once you're ready. Research. There's plenty of people out there like yourself that are happy to help and guide people through these things as well and getting them a better understanding. So if they're going solo, research. Just find a coach out there where they share a lot on their Instagram of what they're doing and the reasons why. And pretty much start. That's all you have to do, is start and then see where it goes from there. Because it's easy to avoid these things if you don't feel clued up in them, but you're never going to progress if you avoid these things.
So just get started.
Just get started. Yeah, there's no reason not to.
Take the smallest bite today.
Exactly. Just get your ass on the floor or stand up. Just move your body. If you don't feel like doing anything too strenuous, do a mobility session where you're on the ground. Like, just explore different positions and see where your body is giving you that tension and the feedback, and envision where the tension is coming from and go from there.
Oh, that's really beautiful. All right, well, that's the golden key. Thank you very much.
I just do it.
Really do it. Yeah, so I mean, that was amazing. Like, that almost exactly follows the steps that I've outline for my course. So no, everybody did not give her the course notes beforehand. But it's really cool because again, you know, different coaches coming from different parts of the world, totally different backgrounds and training, and we all are arriving here at the same principles. So this just goes to show that this is a very universal thing, and like Nettie said, anybody can really start. So just getting started is the hardest part. So, you know, that's why people like yourself and myself are here. So if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, if they wanted to check out your work more or learn from you, where could they do that?
So I have a website. My business is called Up Your ROM. So it normally makes people chuckle when I say that, but upyourrom.com. So up your range of motion. So people can reach me on there. They see the different courses that I do. I'm also on Instagram at nettie.upyourrom as well. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions about anything we've touched on today. And I generally do courses that are either bespoke to their requirements, or I do set courses involving that L-sit progression up to V-sit for compression strength. So you've got strength behind your movements as well.
And highly recommended. Her courses look absolutely amazing. Obviously, you're killing it in the gym too. So definitely
thank you.
if you guys are looking for something to complement this course, that would be a great option for you guys. So
thank
you
you
so much again for taking the time. It was an absolute pleasure. And go check out Nettie's Instagram. Go check out her stuff, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Stop the recording. Here we go.